Welcome to the Sage Verse, with real works and true words. Patterns of recognition leave your brain converged. Time is irrelevant when the thoughts of impediment corrupt your soul with mind-numbing nemesis. The sage's way is where the truth hits the page. Turn your soul into a library in the name of knowledge and discovery. We seek out reality to be gone of human apathy. Welcome to the Sage Verse, where we explore the pressing questions of our age. My name's Jason, and today I'm joined by a good friend of mine and fellow founder of the channel, Hermes. How are we doing today, brother?
Very well, thank you, Jason. This is the Sage's Way podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. So, it's your episode today. Well, it's your subject, rather, shall I say? What topic are we going to be discussing today?
I thought it'd be an interesting discussion to talk about whether good and evil exist. So kind of that idea of where did the initial definitions of good and evil come from? Are they real? Kind of talk about, can anyone be outrightly good or outrightly evil? So just kind of that kind of balance between those two things that have existed. I guess from the beginning of time. What are your initial thoughts to that topic?
Well, I mean, I've thought about this a few times before, and I suppose if we're ever going to attach any meaning to things, then they must exist in some aspect. Whether that existence is based off what we define, or whether it's a definition that lies out of the realm of human definition, in the sense that it exists independently of what we construct socially, and then bring into acceptance as a society. For example, if we had to say something is good, is that our definition of it, or is it objectively good? Is it objectively bad? And how do we define these things? Are we defining these things based off a response from our human condition, such as our response to murder? Or do these things possess some kind of intrinsic quality that tells us whether something is good or evil? That's what I'm thinking at the moment. And just to go off that, the binary there are many binaries within any kind of language we use. For example, we've got good and evil, we've got love and hate, we've got war and peace, right? There are opposites to there are opposites here, and I don't know if hate is the opposite of love. Who knows? But
there's kind of a variety
those are,
of
again,
different
up to
emotions and
definition,
actions.
Right? So that's what I'm thinking at the moment.
My thought pattern's pretty similar. So for me, it's just taking it back to that initial who defined what good is, what evil is, because I guess I understand the balance of kind of order and chaos in that search for order. And I guess most religions kind of had a format for what they defined as good and evil. If you're going to take Christianity, you have Moses's 10 Commandments, for example. So like I think religion tends to kind of create a format of what good, what evil is. And I just, it's always been something that's played on my mind, because not every act is the same. Like an outright statement like "thou shalt not murder," for example. So that would be saying that every act of murder is an act of evil. And that one act of complete anger and someone just out of nowhere.
On the context,
exactly,
as well, right?
The context. If someone just kills someone out of nowhere, out of the blue, an innocent bystander, I guess we would see that as an evil act. Or if someone breaks into someone's house with the intent to murder their family, and someone in a struggle ends up killing that person to defend his family, fighting for justice. That is the same act, but
that's the word,
completely different context.
Justice, right? The idea of murder, the idea of killing like in the Bible, supposedly there are different interpretations of that specific commandment, whether it is "thou shalt not kill" or "thou shalt not murder," because one could go down the route and say that, well, in defense of imminent death or an attack, in order to survive and defend yourself and your family and your loved ones, you may, or someone may be put into a position where they have to kill someone. Now,
Mm.
nobody wants to kill anyone, but if it's you and your family versus an attacker, then you could say a person is within their right to defend themselves in order to prevent their own death. So is that evil? Is that a lesser of two evils there? I mean, how do we analyze that? Because it seems that it's relative. The moral dilemma there is that it's relative to the circumstance. And that's where justice comes in, because whether an act is just or unjust is based on the specific variables and the context at that specific time. So,
or say thou
justice
shalt
is
not steal,
definitely
like someone that's very, abundant in their lifestyle, that, it has a kind of unhealthy relationship with money, that, takes off of the, less fortunate, for example. That's, you could see that as an act of unjust, like a bad act. Or if someone is genuinely, like, not able to provide for their family, and they, in an act of desperation, steal a loaf of bread, for example, to feed their child, again, it's the same act, but two completely different contexts. So I always think there's a spectrum for things, and having kind of outright definitions, I don't think it paints the full picture. Also, that idea of where they kind of came from. I guess the Ten Commandments was Moses, being told by God, these are kind of the main things to follow. Same with, Islam, there's certain prohibitions and things like that. So, if we're going to take it back, did it start from religion, do you think? Or do you think it's just a human knowing, like a natural feeling? You can see or feel when someone's doing some kind of injustice or some kind of evil.
I think the combination of reason and emotion lends itself to the development of moral understanding, which then translates itself in the construction of laws within a society. So it is obvious that we as human beings have emotions and sensibilities, right? We will react to evil, and we will react to what we perceive as goodness in different ways. And these will be a form of guidance as to how we make a decision. And then we accompany that decision making with hopefully the use of logic and reason. So if we are to decide on whether something is moral or not, arguably in how we come about that decision is predominantly based off what makes sense, but a lot of our sensibilities are drawn from how we feel about it. So if we did not have any emotional reactions towards murder, towards love, towards things that move us, then do we have any information or experience to guide our decision making or exercise our mental faculties in order to come to a moral basis, right? So I think that religion, the preconditions for that were either divine knowledge sent from above, or man and woman coming to their moral understanding through reason and their emotions. So religion arguably has to stem from something, and it stems from either of those things. So,
very interesting.
And whether or not, as people like, many atheists and many people that are against religion will say that you don't need religion in order to be a moral being. And there is an argument to that, of course, because not everyone who is religious is by definition moral, and not everyone who is anti-religion is straight out, immoral. So again, like you said, it operates on a spectrum, but what are the defining, or what are the preconditions for morality? Well, I would say reason, and also an emotional susceptibility to responding to whatever action, be it good or evil, or however we define it. That's how I would look at it.
Yeah, you made some really good points there. So I also think it comes from a kind of, a written code based on something that we kind of already internally know. It's like articulating natural truths to an extent. But when you do kind of bring bring things into form, like a scripture or something like that. Again, it usually has to have some kind of outrightly kind of statement, like we said, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, things along that kind of nature. When again, I think everything exists on a spectrum. Like if we take it back to when we were young, and every kind of cartoon we watched, or Disney films, for example, they tended to have the hero and then the kind of villain, Aladdin and Jafar, like for example. And yeah, again, I don't think it's as simple as that. I think people can, fall on the spectrum, but I don't think anyone is outrightly good and anyone is outrightly evil. I think go ahead.
Just to chime in there. The idea of like light and dark, and then you obviously have different shades of color in between that. I think that is operating on the same spectrum as intangible ideas such as good and evil. But again, we have definitions, right? We have good, we have better, then we have best, right? So we have the superlatives and the comparatives, and we have attached meaning to language, right? And that meaning, or that attachment that we've created in language, is attached to how we feel, right? We feel something is the best. So we've defined the language to be that, the vocabulary. If something is better than something, well, it's not the best, but it's better than it, right? So we have arguably defined these things. Whether they are objective is based on, who is the authority on whether or not it's objective.
You can have one culture, though, for example, where their scripture might, say something is their definition of good, and then you might have another culture on the other side of the world which might be a complete contrast to that. So, sometimes it is just based on certain definitions and not kind of an outright,
that's the society there. Definition. That's the social aspect, right? How a society develops based on its environment lends itself to those definitions. But also, there is an integration between the natural truth and the social construct. And perhaps there is a degree of importance in aligning those. But who is to know, or how do we know that we are aligning them in the correct manner? Because there is no agreed upon authority that dictates that.
Yeah, I mean, there's laws that differ in every country as well, like not just religion. I guess you could look at law and order as that is the definition of what is withheld in an authoritarian way, of what is good, what is evil. I mean, there's some countries in which some laws we might look at as, well, that's completely, different from what we have. One example, I believe, the legal age to have sex in the Philippines, I believe, is 12 years old. If someone from the United Kingdom or the United States would look at that and think, wow, that's just, ridiculous. I'm sure there's other definitions and other, certain laws that we would see as outrightly evil, where it might be completely normal elsewhere. So I think, I do think there is a natural law and there is a natural kind of understanding. Usually it's, I think, to do with causing harm to someone else. I would say. But again, going back to the Disney characters and kind of how they outrightly had the hero and outrightly had the villain, I don't think, it's that simple. And I've got a really good quote here by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. The quote is, "The line separating good and evil passes not through states, not between classes, not between political parties either, but right through every human heart. And through all human hearts, this line shifts inside us. It oscillates with the years. And even within hearts overwhelmed by evil, one small bright head of good is retained." So that quote reminded me of, the yin and yang symbol. In the darkness, you still have the light, and in the light, you still have that little bit of darkness, so that I really like that the idea of good and evil exists in every human heart. There's not just outright evil people on the planet, and there's not just outright good people. There's good in every evil, and there's evil in every good. And what would you say is the way of, I guess, someone falling off that balance or falling too much on one side of the spectrum? Is it social conditioning? Is it lifestyle? Is it natural?
Well, what is the defining factor that someone has fell off? Is whenever such an idea arguably becomes tyrannical. Whether, but you could argue that absolute good is a form of tyranny, right? Because it excuses, or it puts forward the absence of evil in its entirety.
Hmm.
And the absence of evil, even if evil is prevalent or bad, whatever we define it, evil for this sake, if it is prevalent within the human condition, as in everyone has a capacity for it, then the
Hmm.
absence of it is a form of tyranny if we are solely focusing on absolute goodness. So if any aspect becomes tyrannical in that it excuses the other, then we have an issue. But
Hmm.
there has to be a balance between the two, right? Because no one's ever going to justify evil, right?
Hmm.
How can we justify it? Do we justify it by its necessity to exist
Hmm.
because we can't get rid of it,
Hmm.
or do we try and take it out of the equation and become by definition tyrannical and
Hmm.
authoritarian in terms of, well, everything must be done objectively this way because that's wrong, when arguably the necessity of evil exists for us to cultivate goodness. Is
Hmm.
goodness the goal and evil the process? Like we have to learn through vice in order to
Hmm.
develop virtue,
Yeah.
or do they exist and they come and go? Right? Are they within us to to deal with as we see fit? I mean, how do we enable a arguably peaceful and beautiful existence,
Hmm.
while also including the presence of, unfortunate evil? Well, I mean, these are difficult questions because all path, like the path, what's that quote? The path to hell is paved with good intentions,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the idea of goodness becoming tyrannical and
Yeah.
leading
I
us
mean, I think
to
even
a
Hitler
place of
probably at one
hell.
stage felt he was doing good, and then.
Well, all sides, right? Uh, Everyone thinks they're doing good.
Hmm.
This is the thing. Everyone
Yeah,
thinks
everyone
they're
thinks they're
fighting
right.
the right side. So,
Hmm.
yeah, that's where I stand on that. I think,
Yeah, so that's why
you
I
know,
always go back to that yin and yang and the unbalance, everything existing on the spectrum. I think it's important to try and find balance with things. And I also think because sometimes with certain religions, there's an attempt to, or even spirituality for that matter, um, try to repress, like I said, the evil that exists within every human heart. Some people try to outrightly paint themselves as completely positive or completely righteous, or and kind of neglect
well, no
that
one
side of
is.
themselves. Yeah, and I think a repressed evil is an evil that is going to come up in ways you might not expect. That could be constantly not wanting to react to your own anger, someone, and you letting people kind of overstep your boundaries, and you're constantly repressing that anger. That's going to end up formulating in
Oh, that's
either
a
a mental
huge one,
health
yeah.
issue, or come out, you're going to completely explode. Or in America, you see often children that are bullied end up becoming school shooters. It all becomes too much until there's an explosion. Or
Yeah, it's a combustion at the end of it. So you have to
combustion,
address these
yeah.
issues as they come. There's a balance, right?
Mm,
They say that anger, right, is an emotion and
mm-hmm,
it has a negative connotation, right? Because it might
mm-hmm,
lead to violence or conflict of some sort.
yeah.
Yet to address those feelings in the first place is of utmost importance, but it's how you address it, right? How you
Mm-hmm,
utilize anger to explain and express your emotions and get your point across without raising it to a point where it becomes a problem, a
yeah.
significant problem, either for yourself, which then translates to an even bigger problem if that person explodes and
Mm-hmm.
expresses that anger towards others, right?
Yeah, it brings
So
back to those seven deadly sins in Christianity. I guess you could say that's the kind of the nature of our evil. That's one way of painting the nature of the evil that exists within everyone: the lust, the
yeah,
greed, the wrath. And I think that a repression of that will come up in an unhealthy way. Like I said, repression is not what you want to go for. You want to have a healthy connection with it. If you are feeling that anger, there's ways in which you can allow that to come up without it being aggression. Aggression is an act of could be an act of violence or an act of evil, you could say. But you could have that anger come up, and you can, release it in another way through, healthy communication, letting someone know you're upset. Or if you want to take it to lust, for example, there's often a lot of religious yeah, it is in Buddhism with monks. There's Catholicism. You have priests that completely, due to the fact there is sometimes negative connotation around sex, and the unhealthy route lust can take you on. There's been like a repression with those two that I'm aware of. I'm sure there's others as well, in which they kind of cut off expressing sexuality at all. And then I've seen many cases in which we've seen with Catholicism, especially like certain priests being, child predators and things like that. That's the repression coming up in an unhealthy way, because you can't completely shut off as if, it doesn't exist without it, eventually, again, coming up to explode in that way. I think you need to allow it to come up in a healthy way. I think there's same with Stoicism. It's not about repressing the emotions. It's about allowing them to come up, processing them, taking that time to process them, rather than being impulsive and just letting it out in its most unhealthy way. But finding the healthy ways of letting that out.
Oh, 100%. No, I 100% agree.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
And I've got a little, another little kind of quote / story. I think paints a good picture of that idea of good and evil existing within everyone. So it's an old wise shaman told his grandson, "My son, there is an endless battle that goes on inside all of us. It is between two wolves. One wolf is bad. He is anger, envy, regret, greed, arrogance, resentment, lies, superiority, and ego, and the other is good. He is joy, he is peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith." The grandson who thought about it and then asked his grandfather, "Which wolf will win?" The old man answered, "The one in which you feed." So I really like that
The one
story.
in which you feed.
Yeah, because
of
that's the
course,
one you're
because
giving the strength to. You're giving the energy
the
to. And
polarity of humankind, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is that dichotomy that exists within us all. Our capacity for both good and evil, and whichever one we feed becomes the driving or primary factor in whatever circumstance. So, in what cases, in which cases or which context do we use either, right? And the fact that it's that yin and yang. I mean, we see these trans-historical truths everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
and this is just an expression of the human condition.
Mm-hmm.
And by virtue of that expression, it is fundamentally true in its being, right? So how we navigate that is essentially the question of wisdom and experience, and choosing one's battles, and choosing how we benefit society and benefit ourselves in the process. And sometimes the path of least resistance is not the best path, right? Sometimes we have to go down the difficult path in order to seek out some longer term gratification that may be better for us. So for example,
what do you think?
For example, like boxers.
Yeah,
I was just going to say, like boxers restraining themselves sexually in order to prepare themselves for a fight and things like that.
Yeah.
Just making subtle decisions in order to change how things will play out.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So that idea of feeding the wolves, feeding the good, feeding the evil, I guess you could see that as, that self-cultivation, the practicing of good habits, unhealthy habits. I guess you could see, if you're talking about evil, as we said, is lust, you could say watching pornography, that's feeding your lust, that's feeding and strengthening the dark wolf within you. Or you could see, practicing healthy habits, exercise, healthy eating, practicing gratitude, things like that are feeding the good wolf within you. But back to the kind of repression, as we said, you're not ever able to completely kill or any one of those wolves. In the yin and yang, no matter how strong the darkness gets, there's always going to be that glimmer of light that still will always exist. So even if you're trying to completely starve one wolf, sometimes a starved wolf, like we said, can act out in an unexpected way. So
You cannot escape nature.
what
You
is the
cannot
best
escape
way
nature.
would you say, to harness the darkness or harness that evil wolf within us to work with us, in a way that's not, detrimental to us or society?
The mind, arguably, is the only thing we can control. And therefore, if we can use the mind to control one's emotional states to make the best decision, the most reasonable decision, arguably the most reasonable thing, maybe to
Hmm.
punch someone in the mouth, right? That may be the most reasonable thing given the
At the time,
circumstance,
yeah,
right? Do you know what I
absolutely,
mean? So,
yeah.
reason at the end of the day is and how we come about that. I mean, what do I say by reason? But how do we come about that? Well, look at the facts of the situation and what is the just cause for action, right? What is the best course for action is arguably that which is most just, right? So some people get their comeuppance just like karma comes back around, right?
Mm.
The universe is a way of
I mean, I've
operating
had a
in
friend that was
opposites.
punched in the mouth before, like, at quite a young age, and I remember before that occurrence, he was very hot-headed, like always trying to start altercations out of nothing, just very reckless, and that was a little
Yeah.
warning shot that kind of humbled him a little bit. And I saw a big change after that happening. So I mean, yeah, it can have a positive benefit. All violence, like I said before, I don't think is outrightly evil, and all what people believe is righteous that they're doing is not always outrightly good. There is always that context. Things are always more complicated than they seem. And, I think when people accept the fact that they do have evil that lives within them, that is when you can move forward and have it stop, manipulating you. Because something, you're unconscious of something, it's able to manipulate you. But when you focus your consciousness
Yeah.
on it, that's when you are then its master. You are then able to direct it in ways. And there's a spiritual practice which is called shadow work. And
Oh yeah.
shadow work is essentially kind of going back to your past
The
trauma,
unconscious, right?
the things that are unconscious within you. Jung talked a lot about this, Carl Jung. And, instead of it manipulating your mental health in the unconscious, you bring it to the conscious, you allow yourself to re-experience anything you've, experienced in the past, and you bring peace to it. That's shadow work. You're working with your shadows. And yeah, that's another thing of why I don't think you can just paint anyone as outrightly good or outrightly evil. Someone that you might look at and say that that person's unjust, that person's doing evil acts. If you look at their childhood, they may have been abused their whole childhood. They may have had terrible parents. They may have been bullied at school. So just that labeling of evil, that demonization, closing something off completely, as outrightly evil. That's why I'm very against cancel culture. It's like, you don't agree with us in this aspect, so we're going to completely shut you out. That never works. It doesn't work, and it's going to arise in an unhealthy way. There is good within everyone, and I think Christianity sometimes paints that
Right.
everyone is
Yeah.
redeemable. That if you,
Mm.
everyone has that ability for redemption. I've mentioned this before, but Malcolm X was, he had a hard upbringing, and it led him to becoming a pimp, somewhat of a gangster. He used to wear red. They call him Red. He wore red suits, and he committed a lot of crime, things like that. And after going to prison, I guess that was his humbling experience. He met someone that was in the Nation of Islam, and he got very passionate about that, passionate about Islam, and he became a great good for the world. He used to give very inspirational speeches, and so if someone is able to change their direction completely, everyone is able to do that at the end of the day. That is tapping into the good. That is the feeding of the good wolf.
Yeah, and I mean, in possession of this knowledge, what can we do with it? Well, I think it makes you aware that everyone around you, no matter how good you may think they are as a human being, um, just understand that everyone has the capacity to fuck up sometime, right?
Yeah.
And everyone has the capacity to do stupid, bad things, right?
Mhm.
No one is wholly pure, and in the same fashion, no one is completely evil.
Mhm.
Now, obviously, we may have dominant aspects of our personality that express goodness or evil in whatever form, but that doesn't mean that that's our entire personality, right? There's a dark side to everyone, as there is a good side. but again, like if you're taking a psychopath, for example, someone who has the amygdala, problems with the amygdala, which is responsible for, emotional understanding and being able to, respond to things in a human way. Well, I mean, arguably something that is more naturally composed, such as, psychopaths arguably being, brought out of nature more so than sociopaths who are more environmentally brought about. Well, again, we have this issue here. I mean, is a psychopath wholly evil? Well, obviously not. Maybe psychopaths all have a generally a higher capacity for antisocial behavior, right?
Yeah.
And whether or not they have the capacity for good or not, I mean, who knows? So there are, again, in this spectrum, there will be extremes, right? There'll be extremes on either side.
Yeah.
And the likelihood of that is just as much as, well, arguably not just as much, but it's there as someone across that spectrum. Like we have a balance for both. So yeah, I mean, it's difficult to put your finger on, as anything is.
Yeah, and there's that. Even if you're talking about leaders in the past, or even religious leaders, Jesus, Moses, Muhammad, these kind of great figures of good. I would say that they were people that went through that kind of spiritual journey. They're not just outrightly good. They faced the evil, and most of them in their stories, they had to face the evil of the devil within themselves. There's that story of usually it's related to Easter as well. Yeah, where Jesus was in the desert for 30 days without any food, and that's when he was faced with the devil, or that could be say the evil that was within him, and he had to face certain trials, and he overcame them. That word of holy, like what is holy? If you want to take it back to the root of the word, that is whole. Whole is someone that has mastered both the good and evil within them. Not someone that has ever got rid of or shut out, but it's someone that has mastered those two things. Someone that has done the shadow work, someone that has brought peace to their shadows, and it no longer manipulates them unconscious. You're basically completely conscious of your whole being. You have no level of yourself unconscious, because how do things become unconscious? That's when you have certain repressions, and you try to cut off parts of yourself, things that you've done that you're guilty of or you're shameful of. That's when we try to we fragment ourselves. We try to pretend they don't exist, but they still do exist within you. You've just moved them into the unconscious
as parts of us. It's all about bringing along this acceptance and being able to bring them, put them in the driver's seat for a time being, to truly understand them and learn from them and learn how to control them and accept them fundamentally.
Absolutely.
I think I think that I've come out of this gaining a lot more understanding of good and evil, or of that binary, however we define it, a lot more just through this discussion. So I appreciate that.
I appreciate a lot of the wisdom you shared today as well. I'll finish with a final quote. I was just looking for it if you saw me typing, but I was trying to remember what it was. So it's Alan Watts. There's various videos of him talking. Sometimes I like to listen to Alan Watts. He has a very soothing voice. When he said, a holy person is someone who is whole, who has, as it were, reconciled his opposites. So I'll show you as well. I've seen in my few of my videos and stuff, I have this tattoo. That's actually the meaning of this tattoo. There's a Chinese phrase I'll show here, which means embrace tiger, return to mountain. And then I have a tiger, and this is as I said, me and Jason studied on Wudang Mountain. This is a temple on the top of Wudang Mountain called the Golden Summit. So that phrase, embrace tiger, return to mountain, that's embracing the tiger or the darkness within us. Return to mountain, which means return to wholeness. It's doing that, reconciling your opposites, not shutting out every part of yourself. That's when people say things like self-love is important. Self-love isn't just, I love myself, it's positive and blah, blah, blah. It's loving the darkest aspects of yourself. loving the mistakes you've made in the past.
Self-acceptance.
Self-acceptance in its
Acceptance
entirety.
is a form of love, right?
Exactly, and you have to be accepting of others and accepting of yourself, and that is the way. Say those school shooters that we see a lot of them in America, if they weren't completely shut out, completely bullied, there is a path of redemption to them. If people, before it's too late, before they have that explosion, tap into that last fragment of good within them, bring them back, let them know that they're not all alone, help them on that path of course, a lot of therapy, I believe, is needed to find that peace and self-acceptance. Well, it is a long journey, don't get me wrong. I've done therapy in the past. I've had a lot of benefit from it, not because of, any massive mental health issue I had, but, just because I'm on that path of, as we said, becoming the sage, self-mastery. I want to tap into every level of unconscious in my being and, reconcile those opposites.
100%. I think that, just to address the final point there, just self-acceptance and doing the internal work and bringing those emotions to the forefront so you can truly understand the complete you, essentially, the darkness and the goodness that exists within all of us. So, thanks everyone for watching.
Thanks for watching, everyone. We hope you enjoyed this discussion. If you could please like the video, subscribe to our channel, share this video with your friends and family, anyone that might find interest in it. We would appreciate it. We are a new channel and we're growing. We have recently also launched Sage's Thoughts. We've got a couple of videos we've just released. Jason's What's It Like Being an ENTP, which is essentially an MBTI type, which Carl Jung coined as well. We mentioned Carl Jung in this podcast. And I also released my version of that, which is What's It Like Being an INTJ. So if you'd like to learn a bit more about that, then check those two videos out. That's pretty much it. Thanks again. Thank you, Jason. And peace out.
Peace out, guys. See you in the next episode.
Welcome to the Sageverse. Please just observe the birth of this creative surge for the purpose to leave hatred purged and replaced with words that will make you learn to take your place on earth. Once you've taken your place and found your greatest of traits, cultivated the day, this will be making you say, this is the Sage's way.